with his primary hand. If Kyrie's off in a game with his right hand, he will literally go exclusively to his left hand. I've never seen nothing like that.
Yeah. All right. So, man, he was then the end there. He says that Kyrie is the most gifted player basically in NBA history. Might be a little hyperbole there, but just let you know, LeBron James, a lot of admiration, highly complimentary of Kyrie Irving at this point in both of their careers, and even said at the beginning, hey, I'm jealous. I'm straight up jealous. Wish I could be teammates with Kyrie Irving because, of course, they won a championship together. What are your thoughts? You're an NBA guy. What are your thoughts about LeBron James's comments on Kyrie?
I mean, he's not wrong on most of that stuff. That it is hyperbole to say he's the most gifted player. But he is extremely talented. He just has everything in his bag. He's a guy who can do so much, can handle the ball so well. I get him saying I want it, but that's LeBron. That's kind of also LeBron mentality, which is I want to play with every single one of the best players all on my team. I want to win every game 9,000 points to 0, and I don't see any problem with that. In my head, that always makes sense. So I like to play with Kyrie. I also like to play with Austin Reeves and Alex Caruso, and I'd like to play with Kevin Durant, and I'd like to play with Steph Curry would be good fun too, and I'd like to play, so I get it. But yeah, I mean, when you talk about what he can do and how important he is to this team, he's 100% dead on. He does things that you just don't expect him to be able to do, and then he does things at points where, especially for the Mavs this season, he's come out a lot of times when where it looks like the Mavs may be out of answers, and then he just all of a sudden has the answer.
I agree with that.
And that's kind of, when he says the wild card, that's kind of what he means is that's the guy who can, well, we don't know how we're going to match up against this team. I'll just go put up 20 points real quick and then completely blow their mind.
While y'all figure it out, I'll keep y'all afloat while y'all figure it out.
Yeah, and I'll just put up 20 real quick, and then while the defense is reeling because they weren't expecting this, because I've been really quiet every other time, then you guys can figure out what you're going to do. But they'll just never be able to really fully be able to stop me, unless they want to try and face guard me and do that. But then everyone else on the team is going to go off because I'm not the guy. If I was the guy, this doesn't work. But if I'm the second guy, this works.
Yeah, you got to say you have, in terms of degree of difficulty shot makers in the NBA, you have two of the greatest in being able to create their own shots and then create indecision on with the defense. And then with that indecision, be able to make shots with the highest degrees of difficulty.
Yeah.
And do it routinely. And they got two of them. That's what makes the Mavs so dangerous. Usually, hell, man, one of those guys is rare. Hell, just a couple of those guys in the league is rare. And you got two of them on the same team.
Yeah, and
that's what's happening.
And that's when you say that gifted in skill, in sports, it's this weird thing about, speeding up and slowing down. And when you throw a ball, there's this point where you can say all day, you can go, well, it's muscle memory and this and that. But you realize you're like, it's kind of a guess always. There's always this part of it where you go, I think this ball will go 80 yards. I think I can hit this guy over here with this amount of speed and he'll be there in that amount of time. So you can train it all day long and you can take shots all day long. But when you're in a game playing basketball and you're cutting across and there's a 7-footer trying to come out on you and you say, I need to get the ball from here to there over this guy and around this guy, you at certain points are guessing because you've never really taken that shot. And if you have, you've done it once before in your life. And for Kyrie, he hits those more than anybody else. Mm-hmm. He hits that kind of shot more than anybody else, where it's kind of him just driving in, and then he'll just go, "Oh, well, no, but I practice that." No, you don't. No one practices this.
Yeah, it's like Kobe did. He's maybe the only one that used to practice.
Yeah,
but
even like that, you can't practice. How a defender is going to react in the game and having to shoot over defenders.
That's intuition. That's intuition.
And so that's when you talk about what his gifts are. He can do that as well, if not better than anybody else. And so then it comes down to constantly being aggressive, finding the places where he needs to be able to do that, not trying to overdo it, because, even if you say he does that very well, that's still probably a 30% shot trying to hit those crazy hard, difficult shots. So, picking your moments when you have to do it. And he's been really good on the Mavs so far of picking his moments.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. That's why he's been such a great number 2 for Luka and the Mavs, because he's so malleable now about whatever they need. Do they need me to be the catalyst? I can do that. Do they need me to be the closer? I can do that. Do they need me to be the guy that when Luka has to take some time, or when Luka's getting all the attention, to just take over the game and basically transform into number 1 for a while? I can do that. I can be the number 1 guy. Like he really, and that's part of his skill too. Is right now he can be whatever they need him to be. It's part of maturity, I should say, more than anything, that he can be whatever they need him to be. And I'll say this: I think it comes down to, because I was listening to Zach Lowe talking about this on his podcast, and he made a good point about, listen, Luka and Kyrie are so gifted and so skilled. If they know how you're going to attack them, they'll make the right decision most of the time. If they know exactly what kind of, if you're going to blitz them, or if you're going to double them, or if they're going to switch to pick and roll, or, if they're going to drop, whatever. If they know exactly what you're doing, then they're going to pick you apart. And the key really is going to be for Boston, and Boston can do it because Boston not only has the defensive acumen, but they got the bodies. Defensively, they got the players, elite defenders, period, where they can try to throw something different at them almost every time down the floor. Now, it'll be things they've seen, but they won't know what's coming, and try to keep Kyrie and keep Luka guessing as to what defensive strategy they're going to utilize. Because once they diagnose it and figure it out, then you're pretty much cooked, because Luka and Kyrie, because they got 2 of them, especially if they're on the floor at the same time, those guys are going to solve the problem. What you have to do is you have to make them indecisive in terms of diagnosing what the defense is. Okay, what is? Okay, oh, I got it. And then sometimes making them second guess themselves about what the defensive strategy is going to be. Boston may be one of the only teams in the NBA that's got the defenders and the defensive acumen to be able to do that. Now, is that taxing? Is that going to be mentally? They're going to be mentally and physically fatigued as long as the series goes on, having to do that every time down the floor. Yeah, probably so. I mean, that is brutal repetition to try to be able to do a different look defensively every time down the floor strategically.
Well, and two, this is a Boston team that is shown to be lazy at points and shown to play with its food and let teams stick around and let teams be in it, to go, do they have the concentration to stick with something like that, or they show it and get a 10-point lead, 12-point lead early and go, cool, we just won the series, NBA Finals champs. Crap, they're up 7. Because that's what Boston's been doing this whole playoffs, is get a lead, get a decent lead, and then, okay, we'll just play our style of basketball and we'll be good for the rest of the game. And they're not. And the defense starts to lapse off a little bit, and they play just, one-on-one, and teams can scheme against it again better. But yeah, I mean, the biggest question in this series still goes into, at least in game 1, is how do they defend the back cuts and the pick and roll of what Dallas likes to do? How do you defend that without having a traditional big man defender where Lively and Gafford and Jones and PJ Washington are all going to be cutting to the rim, trying to get lobs from 2 guys who can throw really good lob passes up to him, and Luka and Kyrie. So if you say that's the biggest question, is how do you defend? How is Boston going to try to defend that? Because the more you blitz and do everything else, the ball falls into another really good playmaker's hands, and then that guy goes in and just lobs the ball up, and you're scrambling to get back on defense. So how do you continue to not just slow down their scoring, but slow down the fact that they're just going to try and go inside and get dunks and layups early on you to make you back off of Kyrie and Luka a little bit and give them space to work? That, to me, is the first question of what Boston's going to do, because they just don't have the size on the roster to really stop it with anybody. So if Porzingis comes back, it helps a bit, but I don't know how they're going to, you're going to try and bump people off. You're going to try and do whatever you can to not allow them to get there. You're going to try and cut off baselines and not allow Jones and PJ Washington to cut down there on pick and rolls, try and, put a body on somebody and, maybe pick up a foul a couple times. Don't let them get into rhythm. You can do all those pieces, but that, I think, is, a number 1 of what you have to watch for Boston. The rest of it is changing it up and trying to throw different looks at them. You can do to a certain extent, but I think at that point too is when you have that 1-2 punch, and that's easier to do if one of those is out of the game, Kyrie or Luka is out, it's much easier. Just keep throwing looks at that one guy and make somebody else on this team do something.
Yeah.
But if you say they're both in, all right, other guy, take up the court. I'll just stand over here. So your entire defensive game plan that was to take me out is completely null and void because I'm just standing over here now. And now Kyrie's going to run the offense. Okay, you're going to stop Kyrie? Okay, Luka's going to run the offense.
They can't stop both of them.
And as much as you want to say the team can figure it out, we talked about it yesterday about teaching players to make high basketball or football IQ plays in big moments. You have to teach basketball players to say, we need to be on the same page. And when we call it on the court and they decide to switch up what they're doing, and Luka walks up the court and we're expecting him to have the ball and Kyrie has it, and our defense is set for Luka. All right, now switch it to Kyrie. And then Luka comes back up and gets the ball. Okay, switch it back. Okay, they pass the ball back over. And, you'll still see them try and do the biggest thing they try and do to all these teams is separate the two. So basically bump guys and set them up and push them into areas, push them on the other sides of the court. So the ball is 2 passes away from getting to the other guy to make it a little bit harder. You always want the ball to have to transition through somebody. It's something Minnesota did in the game they won against the game they've won, and then games that they were competing with the Mavs with was when you try and get the ball into Gafford's hands or Lively's hands and get the ball to them about 7-8 feet from the basket and make them a passer, because then that's taking out of what their best element is. So you can try and push the Mavs to say, we need 2 passes to get between the two of you. But at the same point, that's what teams have been doing to the Mavs for the last 3 series. Yeah. So they're aware now of how to play against that better and better and better. And they're getting better and better at fighting those blitzes and better, because that's been it. Because it is a team that is never going to be anything but guard-based, as you're not going to run the offense through the post. You're not running the offense through PJ. You're not running through Derrick Jones. So if you're not running it through anyone but one of those 2 guys, then you've had to figure out other solutions to, even with defenses throwing every look at you, how to get through them.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And to piggyback on what you brought up about the lobs and the big men getting the dunks, Luka is, how about this? He has 49 assists on dunks in these playoffs.
Exactly.
That is tied for the most assists on dunks in the playoffs since 1997. So to your point, it's a big part of what they do offensively, huge part of it. And yeah, Luka's been killing teams with that lob pass. And also throwing this out there too, because I want to ask you about this Spurs story just really quickly before we get to the break. I saw this, and this is crazy that's happening in back-to-back years. So remember 2 years ago, Nikola Jokic was the first player in NBA history to complete what I think they're calling it the trifecta, the playoff trifecta, where you lead the playoffs, the postseason in points, rebounds, and assists in all 3 categories. Yeah. And Jokic did it 2 years ago. A year ago. This year, Luka's doing it right now. It had never happened in the 76 years of the NBA playoffs. It had never happened, and now it's going to happen in back-to-back years. Well, it may. I don't know if Luka, we'll see how it does through the NBA Finals. Right now, he's leading the postseason in points, leading the postseason in rebounds, and leading the postseason in assists. Yeah, wow. I mean, he is their everything. Kyrie is second actually in points, and Kyrie is second in assists. How about that? Kyrie and Luka are first and second in the postseason in points and assists. Jason Tatum is third.
Yeah, that's
Jaylen Brown is fourth in points, but Drew Holiday was fourth in assists. Luka, I heard Tim McMahon say this, that several times Luka has been quoted essentially. I'm make sure I wrote it down in my notes to make sure I got it right. That Drew Holiday is the best perimeter defender in the NBA. Yeah, and Luka has said it multiple times.
Now the issue with Drew Holiday is he's getting older, but yeah, I mean that was a deal when he went to Milwaukee, and those years in Milwaukee when they won the championship, he's by far the best perimeter defender in the NBA. And so now it's just as he gets older, how much of that first step is he losing? How much of that on the defense? Yeah. But he's still the guy, and Derek White's really good at what he does too. So you're saying you may be able to beat him one more or two more or three more times a game than you used to be able to beat him. But no, he's a beast. That's why there's a bunch of articles being written right now about how basically Milwaukee and their attempt to get to the next title screwed themselves because Drew ended up on Boston and made Boston a title contender again because they were going to be a little bit weaker without Marcus Smart and what they were trying to build. And then all of a sudden they end back up with Drew Holiday because they trade Drew Holiday from Milwaukee to Portland. Portland doesn't want him, so they send him off to Boston. And now they get this great perimeter defender, a champion, and all these other pieces to add onto the roster.
Yeah.
Get
richer.
And so, yeah, it was an issue of Milwaukee kind of shot themselves in the foot where if they could have said, well, we'll trade Drew Holiday, but please keep him in the West, they would have.
Yeah. Seriously. Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't think about that. You're right. Okay, real quick.